Welcome to the top of the world. Or if the weather takes a turn for the worse, hell on earth. Among this Yorkshire bog and scrubland lie the remains of a settlement built by a tough nomadic community that lived on the very edge of society. Using the most basic of tools, they transformed the face of the British landscape forever. And 170 foot below me lies one of their most impressive monuments. Because this is the last of the great railway lines to be built by the navvies. And this is the Rise Hill Tunnel, driven through solid rock by the sheer brute force of hard manual labour. We've come here to dig where that itinerant army lived, worked and often died. Underneath this grass, hopefully, will lie clues to the story of the people who physically built modern Britain. The Settle to Carlisle Railway's route takes it through the Yorkshire Dales, revealing sweeping vistas and breathtaking scenery. It was built by the Midland Railway in the 1870s to challenge its rivals on the lucrative England to Scotland run. And the 3/4 mile long tunnel that cuts through Rise Hill is on one of the most isolated stretches of that track. This is the most exposed site we've ever dug on. If the rain kicks in, we're going to be so miserable. And it was your fault. This was your idea.
It was, Tony, because I feel passionately that we spend far too much time looking at the bridges and the viaducts and the massive monuments of the Industrial Revolution, and we forget about the ordinary blokes who did all the work, who constructed these things. You know, the navvies or navigators. I mean, look at some of those rocks. I mean, they weigh tons. And they were removed by hand. This was the last of the hand-dug railways. And the people who did all this work actually lived here on Rise Hill Navvy camp. And they were here for 5 years, and then, psh, they just vanished.
This was built in the 1870s. It's the Victorians. It's very, very easy to say, oh, it was only made yesterday. But it is still wonderful archaeology. We don't know how many buildings were up here. We don't know how they survived. And more importantly, when they went away, we don't know how much they left and how much of that site actually survives.
We have got to approach it as if it was a prehistoric site. And for a start, you know what that means? That means we don't treat it as something unimportant and just 130 years old. We treat it with immense respect.
It's only like prehistory in that we know almost nothing about it, come on. But if we look at what we've got in terms of real history, documentary history, we have got masses. We've got school records, we've got health records, and most valuable of all, we've got the 1871 census. And that tells us who was living here, their ages, and even their occupations. So we've got a chance to actually put people in the houses we find.
You're all quite excited about this one, aren't you?
Too right.
Well, Helen may have lots of records to play with, but for a settlement built during the height of the Victorian period, there are surprisingly no maps, plans or photographs showing what it looked like.
You'd expect the navvies to be working close to this air shaft. The grass is different. When you actually walk along it, you can see there are slight terraces and humps and bumps that might be building-looking structures. So I'd concentrate your energies in that area between that track there and that dry stone wall to start with.
All we know from contemporary records is that the Rise Hill camp was split into 2 settlements huddled around these air shafts that provide ventilation for the tunnel below.
I think you've got a wall coming along here,
Yeah.
turning, you've got a fireplace,
Right.
probably at this
In
point,
there.
and a big
So
building going
and then
that
we
way.
want. So at least if we pin a
But the
corner-
geophys results are complicated, to say the least.
Well, we're in this area here. This is where I think we've got one of the main structures.
The point of it is we just simply don't know what this site's going to look like once we start taking the turf off.
Well, get on with it then.
I will do. OK, then, let's get some string put in and some pegs put in, please.
So, Trench 1 goes in over a geophys response that we think may contain the remains of a navvy hut. I say think because no one's ever really dug a navvy camp before.
And we want to get a big enough area we can really see what's going on.
This is uncharted archaeological territory. You said to me that this was like a prehistoric site. What did you mean? What are the parallels between digging here and digging something from 3,000 years ago?
We've got to work from first principles. So in archaeology, that means working from the known to the unknown, okay? So what do we know? Well, human beings need to eat, you've got to go to the toilet, you've got to stay warm, and you've got to stay dry, okay? Those four things will leave their traces in the ground. So that is the basis on which we work.
What about finds? There's an interesting notion here, really, isn't there? What is it that people 130 years ago would have left, which will tell us about their lives today?
What makes this site really remarkable, Tony, is that it's an archaeologist's dream. It was occupied for a very short time and then abandoned. So you can say that everything we find here was used for 5 years in the 1870s. And that will tell people an immense amount about the life of ordinary working men, what they would have used for those 5 years they were here.
Bill, our first evidence of domestic activity.
Piece of clay pipe. And our first piece of pipe. That's a big old piece. Bill?
Yeah, what's that, Phil?
You're a little bit familiar with the material round here.
Oh, well, that's a bit of late Victorian creamware. Perfect date for the Navvy settlement. Probably for storing something like potted meat or lard.
What the hell's that?
That will be a bit of fire brick. And the navvies would have been sitting here, drying their clothes out after a hard day's work.
I know.
Trying to get warm again.
Having a few beers.
Yeah, smoking some
smoke.
tobacco.
It's having a
bit of lard.
on a bit of bread. You know, it's all, you know, kind of reconstruct the scene already, can't you?
Lifestyle.
This tightly dated group of finds suggests John's geophysics has dropped us into the area of the Navvy camp. So we'll continue to concentrate our efforts around shaft number 2. While the area around shaft 1, which has been affected by later forestry work, is now home to the modern-day itinerant tribe known as Time Team. We've virtually had to create our own town here. And, of course, we've had the luxury of coming up here every day in 4x4s, and we're only here for 3 days. But Helen, the navvies were here for months and months and years, weren't they?
They were. The railway began to be built in 1869 and went on to 1875. But the navvies would have come from another job and moved on to a third when they finished, because it was a long-term career. Navvies had been building railways since the 1830s, and before that they were building canals, so they really did know what they were doing.
Why were they prepared to do such hard work?
If you consider what was actually happening in the cities in the textile producing towns, say in the West Riding of Yorkshire, like Bradford and Leeds and in Manchester alike, you find that kind of work actually in the mills was becoming very maternal. So therefore that the employers were employing women and children. It released this sort of raw labour for this kind of large construction programme. They had very little choice other than to pick up a pick, an axe and a shovel and start digging for a living.
Helen, you said you thought that there would be a lot of documentation. Were you right?
There's an enormous amount, yes, and I'm just wading through it at the moment, trying to get a handle on how many surnames and how many people are around here. But I'm having a couple of problems. These people who are slightly on the edge of society, maybe, are perhaps not always being entirely honest with the census returning officer. So I've got this chap here who's living in one of the huts, right at the bottom of this great list of lodgers. Under name, it says, a man with a big nose. And under relation to head of family, it says tramp.
Well, you don't often get much more personal information than that. But as well as the historical resources at our disposal, we're also going high-tech. The Environment Agency have sent a plane up for us to laser scan the whole site. And the impressive detail of the resulting LiDAR survey suggests we could be looking at a very sophisticated settlement.
You can see the railway coming into the tunnel here and coming back out again from here. So that's what they were digging.
Henry, I don't want to be hurtful, but it's kind of a bit better than a lot of the stuff that you show us,
Oh,
isn't it?
I can't believe you're saying... Well, yeah. Because you've got all this detailed data, you're seeing all the stuff which you can't really see clearly on the ground. You see hints of some of these sort of rectangular enclosures, probably the footings for some of the buildings. So we've got a lot of processing to do with this, but we're starting to see some features. You can see the old tramway running up through here, and it's not there anymore, but you can see that coming through.
And our next target is going to be this tramway that Henry's identified, as it would have been essential for bringing up food and materials from the valley below.
Yep. And it's going all the way down that steep slope. It's going right down to the valley bottom, isn't it? But I mean, it's incredibly steep. I mean, you couldn't have pulled wagons up with a locomotive like that.
We've not got a running locomotive along here. We've got something that's stationary at the top.
What, a winch, a winding thing?
Yeah, so we've got a winch that's powered by a steam engine, and it's got a big rope that is attached to the wagons, and it pulls the wagons up. But you see that patch of nettles over there, and what looks like a corner of a structure?
Let's have a look. I mean, nettles, if this was a medieval site, nettles mean occupation, I mean, that sort of thing. I mean, that's pretty good. So what do you reckon that does mean?
I think this is where our winding house is, with the steam engine.
So Trench 2 goes in over what we think is the winding house and rail track of a supply line to the camp. And over at Trench 1, it now looks like we've hit a substantial building. Well, the old turf's come off lovely, isn't it?
It's come off very, very well, Tony. In fact, I mean, now that we've got down onto it, we're realising this is stunningly good archaeology. And what we've got is we've got our hearth here and another one coming from and around there. They're literally back to back.
We know that there weren't just single men living up here. Many navvy huts were rented out to families who looked after a host of lodgers. And these back-to-back fireplaces suggest we've landed in the heart of this setup.
That's where you have the living quarters for the navvies, the living room and the dormitory. Here on this side, you have the private quarters for the hookkeeper, the sitting room and his bedroom.
How many of these have been excavated in the past?
This is the first one to be excavated.
Ever?
Ever, yeah.
Not in the entire country?
None at all.
So it looks like we've got some sort of accommodation block.
Here's this one in the Lancaster Guardian. There are a blacksmith shop, 8 huts, miners' cabins, storeroom...
And that means Helen and David can begin to try and match what's coming up in the ground with the historical evidence.
A mortar, mill and 5 huts, right. So if we've got about 10 people per hut, 80 and 50, so that's 130 people.
If our dig can work out which building is which, then they should be able to match them up with the occupants listed in the 1871 census. If only you could do that with Roman sites.
Gosh, Matt, you've made progress.
Yeah, we've just stripped off the turf, and as you can see, at this end of the trench, where we would have had the winching room, you've got all this rubble here, and I guess that could have been the beginning of the walls, the foundations, or something that's collapsed.
It looks more like wall than foundations, don't you think?
Yeah, so we're going to record that and then see underneath if we can see if there's any foundations left. And if you go along this way, you can see a slight hump there, down, slight up again. I guess that those are where the 2 tracks were, one on the top of that ridge and one on the top of that ridge going along there.
We now think one of these 2 tracks ran all the way to the settlement around Airshaft 1. So Rise Hill was no cliched shanty town, but rather a planned settlement with large heated buildings and its own rail system. And thanks to the weather turning, we're now establishing just how truly miserable it must have been for the navvies who lived and worked up here.
Children, stop enjoying it. No sooner than we drain the water away in here, the weather we're going to get is going to fill it up again.
But as the end of the day rapidly approaches, all attention is on Matt's Trench over the supply railway. Not so much for the archaeology, but because it turns out it was the site of one of the worst disasters to befall the Rise Hill navvies.
The story is just awful. It was that...
Come on, tell us.
Well, people from the camp were in the habit of going down the tramway, down the incline of an evening, because it was being worked all the time. And on this evening, there were 11 people getting into 3 trucks, and off they go down the incline. And the pin that holds the truck to the wire rope breaks, and so the trucks break free. And there's a man in the truck who tries to put a stick or something into the wheels to slow it down. And they managed to get 9 people out of the wagons, but the last 2 are still in there, two women. And the truck gets derailed, they're flung out, and they're killed pretty much straight away. And then, unbelievably, somebody was coming up on foot drunk, and then he decided to lie down for a bit of a sleep and put his head on the rails, and the next thing was he was decapitated by the runaway truck.
It's stories like that and weather like this which makes you realise just how harsh life was for the men, women and children who lived up here at Rise Hill. And it's now clear we've only just scratched the surface of this settlement. We're starting to realise that this wasn't just a random collection of huts, it was a complex village. So tomorrow we're going to be moving up this slope to see if we can find out what's left of it. But in addition, down there is the Rise Hill Tunnel, and we're going to be excavating all over here to see how that army of navvies created it.
Join a thriving worldwide community of Time Team fans on Patreon.
Our new target is to reach 15,000 worldwide supporters on Patreon by the end of 2025. This will enable us to continue expanding the Time Team world with more digs and greater access than ever before.
It's the start of day 2 in the Yorkshire Dales. Although the weather is atrocious, our hearty band of archaeologists are slowly getting to grips with the remains of our Victorian navvy camp.
It's fairly wet, isn't it?
I think wretched is the word, Francis. Absolutely wretched. What it means is that we have to be so much more disciplined about the way we're digging. We have to really, really minimise the amount of spoil that we create, because literally it just becomes slurry.
And in spite of, or possibly because of, the terrible conditions, Phil's now beginning to work out just how sophisticated the buildings had to be here to survive the harsh environment.
It's quite noticeable that the fireplace is higher than everything else in your trench. And I mean, there's water flowing down the back there to a drain that you've cut out there in the corner. Do you think that these buildings were actually jacked up so that water could flow underneath them?
I imagine they must have been. I mean, we do know that obviously the floor was level, that's supported on wooden piers. So, yeah, I mean, I'm quite sure. You would not want to be living with a floor this close to this sort of muck. And it's just the same for them as it is for us.
Yeah, exactly.
We're digging in the shadow of these massive spoil tips, basically thousands of tons of stone that were removed when the Rise Hill Tunnel was dug. But what I can't understand is why it's all up here. And possibly even more importantly, why would anyone choose to base their workforce so far from the tunnel entrance? Did they drill the tunnel from here or from the other side, or would they have started both sides and work towards the middle?
If you start working a face at this end and at the other end, you can only actually have two faces working, can't you? But if you drill vertical shafts down along the line, when you get to the bottom, you can set one face going that way and another face going that way, and then number 2 shaft, one going that way and going that way. And when they all meet up, you've got your tunnel. You've actually got 6 tunnels all working at once. It's much more efficient.
So is that why the navvy settlements were up the top of the hill, rather than where I would logically think they would be, which is down here at the entrance to the tunnel?
Exactly. You've actually got more of your workforce, because you've actually got 4 faces coming down vertically, down these tunnels and shafts, than you've got at either end. It's classic Victorian economics. It's quicker and more efficient to do it that way.
The air shafts, not surprisingly, allowed air to get into the fetid environment of the tunnel. But they were also used to get people into and stone out of the excavation. And Stuart believes that a series of lumps and bumps around air shaft 2 show that this heavy lifting was done by machine.
If you look at this sketch I've done of it, where we're standing here on the spoil heap, there's the shaft over there. And what we've got running along that area where the rocks are onto the other side of the wall, we've got a long rectangular building, which we think might be
our boiler house.
Ah, for what?
To supply steam for a steam engine.
Ah.
Well, this is a bit of a shock. Here we are celebrating the last navvy dug railway in Britain, and Mike and Francis are putting in trenches to investigate a boiler house and steam engine.
Well, they've always used machines to aid them on top of the tunnel. I've got a picture here from 1839 of a similar tunnel where they're using manpower, horsepower and steam power to process everything on top of the tunnel itself. And here, they're using that on the surface, but below they're still using hand power.
But we're not just finding evidence of how they worked. A picture's also emerging of how the navvies and their families lived up here. And surprisingly, we're getting glimpses of a much more civilised society than I expected.
Never change, do they? Look what I got here.
Cool. Does that actually say tea?
It does. It's a bit of somebody's teacup, and it actually says tea on there.
A bit more elegant than my cup. Although, having said that, there are plenty of examples of the hard-working, hard-drinking navvy stereotype my mother warned me about.
We've got two here called William Williams and John Atkins, better known as Policeman Jack. William Williams challenged Policeman Jack to a fight, but Policeman Jack has managed to knock down William Williams and he's died.
Policeman Jack, that nickname would come from Punch and Judy, as in Policeman Jack in Punch and Judy. If you can recall any of the scenes from Punch and Judy, he's generally beating people with a truncheon or beating them up in one way or another.
Oh, so he's got previous, hasn't he?
Well, yeah, he's got some sort of colourful past.
Yeah, and actually here we've got a name for William Williams as well. Yeah. Be scandalous.
I love the
so
names.
goodness knows what William Williams had done previously. Golly, what a lawless place it seems to have been, doesn't it?
Well, it is a little bit wild, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've been looking at some of the photos that we've dug up of 19th century navvies. They certainly seem to have been a pretty robust, rather scary-looking lot. This is my favourite. This is Mrs. Rachel Hamilton, who apparently was a Navvy forewoman, which really rather surprised me because I didn't know they had female navvies, but she was certainly very well qualified for the job. She was 17 stone in weight and 6'4" tall, and perhaps, unsurprisingly, she was known as Big Rachel. And we wanted to find out how our present-day diggers would cope under the regime of a 19th century navvy. So, ladies and gentlemen, you've already met Big Rachel. Now meet Medium Matt. What are we going to do with him? You've got to admit, he does look rather like a boy from the 1960s in Carnaby Street.
Oh, he's not going to by the time we finish with him, because we're going to make him live the life of a navvy. Now, some of the things I've read say that a navvy is expected to move 20 tonnes of muck a day, but we have no idea how realistic this is, so this is what we're going to make Matt do. We've got a wheelbarrow made by Kerry, and we've given him this lovely outfit, so it's authentic up to there.
You're looking a bit clean, aren't you, Matt?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of that, though, is going to end up on me, I think.
We're going to have to build you up, though. You are going to eat what a navvy ate every day. He's really going to do this tomorrow, right? Breakfast. 6 slices of bacon, 2 pints of beer, a can of condensed milk, tea, loaf of bread, early 11s, pint of beer, late 11s, pint of beer and bread and butter. Lunch, a steak, loaf of bread, 2 pints of beer and tea. Late lunch, pint of beer. A snack, bread and butter. Guess what? Pint of beer. Dinner, another steak, boiled potatoes, loaf of bread, 2 pints of beer and tea.
Oh, nice cup of tea at the end of it.
You can handle that,
I can take
you?
it, yeah. I'm
Big
sure.
navvy.
I'll sweat
I'd like
it all
to
out.
see it.
I'm not totally sure he'll survive the diet. I've got your beer, all right? That's your first one.
Cheers.
Let alone shifting 20 tonnes of rock. I've got feta and walnut
Oh,
salad.
lovely.
So remember, don't try this at home. Always go for the healthy option. And I'll probably have a glass of fruit juice.
Now, I gather, Henry, you've got the LiDAR results.
Yeah.
Back out on site, the archaeologists are now looking for the end wall of Phil's house.
Now, just in this area, there's a break in the bank, which could mean the end of the building here.
Well, that's right. I mean, we know it's got to be somewhere in here, because we know that that blob there is a fireplace.
Thanks to the LiDAR and Phil's sixth sense, the diggers think they found another fireplace on this terrace, suggesting there are in fact 2 houses on it. They now need to see if they're right by finding the gap between the 2 buildings.
OK, well, let's put in a 3-metre square here that'll give us the path, and it'll also give us what's happening underneath your dormitory.
Well, exactly. That's the next thing, because we do need to know what sort of finds we're getting from this sleeping end of the building.
Yeah. Jolly good. OK, let's go.
As well as confirming we've got 2 huts here, the archaeologists hope that the space between them will be full of rubbish that's been chucked out of the buildings.
You name it, we've got it. We've got everything but the kitchen sink. But some of these pieces actually join together.
I think it's a bit of an odd shape.
Oh, yeah, look, it goes with that earlier bit.
Yep.
As Francis has told me more than once, it's exactly how he'd approach a prehistoric or any archaeological site.
So we got a glass. Well, they knew how to enjoy themselves, little boys.
Because at the heart of archaeology is rubbish, and rubbish is information. And now that the weather's improved, we're getting a lot of both over at the industrial side of the site. Anything good come out?
Oh, we've got some nice little goodies to show you. As we know, people were smoking clay pipes. They smoked a lot of them. But these are different. They're coloured and decorated.
Will we be able to photograph those and send them off to somebody to identify them?
That's the idea, and they're very identifiable.
I've just noticed. Is this what I think it is?
It is indeed, Tony. It is a shoe. But more than that, we think it's an overslipper, like a hobnailed overslipper. You can see the little hobnails in the bottom there.
Yeah, it's made of metal, isn't it?
Mm.
It's not very big. You could wear that.
I could wear this indeed, but remember there are other people here with the navvies, their children, their wives, so it could be a child's shoe.
So this could be someone clearing out the pump room?
Yeah, with all the nasty jobs, cleaning out all the sort of furnaces and all that kind of thing.
And look at that, worn away.
Indeed, the heel is worn away at such an angle, which suggests that they may have walked with quite a funny kind of gait.
She'd have been in a right old state, wouldn't she?
She wouldn't have been very well at all, no.
Is that it? 2 rocks? I'm getting tired, sir.
For new navvy Matt, life's getting more Victorian by the moment. We're keeping a tally of how many barrows he
Can't
shifts.
feel my legs anymore, sir.
Because for a navvy, earning a living relied totally on how hard you could work. Truly a case of where there's muck, there's brass.
It didn't matter what they were moving, whether it was mud, soil or stones, they had one word for it, and that word was muck. Another interesting word which does come from the period of the navvies is the word tramp. Then it actually meant the act of walking from one construction site to another. So if you're a navvy looking for work and you walked across Britain, you went on the tramp to look for work.
So have you heard about the man from the census with the big nose? Because he's written down as, it says relationship to head of household, and it says on tramp.
That means rather than being on site, he's moved on and he's in the process of walking from one site to another. Oh. He's on his tramp.
Come on, get a move on. Is that pipe lit?
No, can't afford baccy.
Only beer.
Yeah.
And as I was walking across here, further...
Back in the modern world, we're now looking for new areas of the settlement to investigate. And by combining the Jackson Pollock-like geophys results with the LiDAR...
Pull up the geophysics.
We found a number of areas that don't look anything like Phil's huts.
There's another whole series of buildings and structures just below the spoil heap. Can you see?
I mean, that's where we're getting these really strong responses. These look more industrial-like, as we might expect. I mean, they're totally different in character to the hut responses.
So basically, we've got this area up here, which you've got those strong responses, and we've got the area of possible buildings on the edge of the tramway.
Back up here.
On further inspection, these possible new buildings further down the hill seem to be less domestic and more, how shall I put it, functional.
And it doesn't have fireplaces, so it's unlikely to be where somebody's living. So I was just wondering, something this small, immediately below the accommodation blocks, whether this could actually be a toilet block.
It's the ideal place for it. You don't want your toilets actually in the huts. That's what the Victorians didn't do that. So this is actually behind the back of the huts.
And that's where you'd expect them to be?
That's exactly the right place for a Victorian outhouse.
But it's getting towards the end of day 2, so we'll have to wait until tomorrow to investigate this prized target. That should also give us enough time to choose a willing volunteer to dig it. When you told me you were going to find pumps and engines and whatnot, I imagined that we'd be excavating great metal struts and sumps and rusty pulleys. There is nothing here.
You're standing in a building, Tony.
Over on the other side of the air shaft, the industrial story has reached a surprisingly swift conclusion.
We've got a major wall there.
Yeah.
Runs about that stone over there,
yeah.
Back down here, and then we've got the back end here.
Just hit this hump here, yeah. And what was in it?
This is the boiler house.
How do you know that?
Well, several things. It's full of clinker from the flues underneath the boiler. And we've got fire bricks, which would have lined the whole thing.
So what's over here?
Well, we were looking for the engine house, Tony.
But it's not here?
It's a little bit more complicated than that. You're standing on a big bank that runs over here, and we've got a wall in front of it.
That's this revetment here, yeah?
Yeah, and there's one at the back,
yeah,
and we've got a clay middle to it.
So what's that for?
Well, it looks as though it's the dam for a big reservoir behind here.
All of which begs the question, where is the engine?
Well, it's actually really only one place it can be, which is over there between us and the spoil heap. And the water in here would have supplied the boiler over there, the boiler would have made the steam went to power the steam engine.
Slowly but surely, the parts of our Navvy camp jigsaw are falling into place. But we still have any number of platforms, lumps and bumps in the ground, and weird geophys results to investigate in the last day. But what's intriguing me most is our living history experiment. How many steaks have you had so far?
4.
And how many pints?
4 as well.
Do you think you'll survive for 24 hours?
At the moment, yeah, I reckon if the steak and ale kind of quota carries on in the same rate it is.
I don't.
If you'd like to see more episodes like this, you can make it happen.
Our new target is to reach 15,000 worldwide supporters on Patreon by the end of 2025. This will enable us to continue expanding the Time Team world. Enjoy front row seats for the greatest show on Earth and under it. It's the start of a horrendous day 3 in Yorkshire, where we're investigating the remains of a railway navvy camp. The conditions are some of the harshest we've experienced, but for some, it's about to get a whole lot worse. I'm just cooking a nice bit of navvy's breakfast for our trainee navvy, Matt. Matt, how much beer did we make you drink yesterday on your navvy's diet?
Well, I think by the end of the working day, it was about 5 pints.
How did you feel? Did you have a hangover this morning?
Well, it wasn't really too bad, because the intake of beer was so slow and steady all day, and there was so much food involved that I kind of felt all right this morning.
And you got a special treat this morning, haven't you? You've got the condensed milk in the cup of tea.
Lovely.
Actually, you're going to need all of this. You've got another 18 tonnes of stone to shift by lunchtime, and it hasn't stopped raining since about 6 o'clock last night. Can you hold this for me? So, good luck, mate. Enjoy your breakfast. But Matt's not the only one with a mucky day ahead of them, because up on the hill, Raksha is now investigating the potential site of the Navvy's toilet block.
One thing I imagine from a WC point of view, at least it will be a very small trench, won't it?
What's so bizarre about it is that you actually volunteered to do it, didn't you?
I did!
Why?
I know I must look utterly bonkers at this moment in time, but this is the most exciting part of the site.
Why exciting? Explain yourself.
Okay, all right, people are going to go to the loop, but also they chuck all their rubbish in there. Just think of all of the goodies and the personal items that we're going to find.
You really don't mind being up to your knees in latrine soup?
No. I like a bit of... Can I say that?
Literally 15 seconds after the end of that conversation, Raksha gives me a shout. What is it, Raksha?
Well, it's quite thick, but I think it's the bottom of a wine glass. It could also be a candelabra. It's kind of really nicely decorated at the bottom. We'll have to get somebody in Fines to have a look at that.
And I doubted the point of what you were doing.
You're so cynical.
But I'm not any longer. I love the idea of this guy sitting on the loo drinking Nuit Saint-Georges, or else holding up his candelabra in the middle of the night and then breaking it. Disaster.
I know.
Confirming this is the remotest toilet block in Britain is just one of the tasks we've set ourselves.
Oh, God, I'm stuck.
We've already established a steam engine and a railway line over at the air shaft, and we now want to see what sort of industrial activity has caused these geophys results.
Francis.
Is that the wall you got there?
Yeah, Francis, end of the trench.
Well, I mean, it's not very substantial. I was expecting, you know, it wouldn't take machinery, would it?
No, it's a low stone wall with some kind of timber wall above it.
And that pinky stuff looks like very intensive burning to me.
Yeah, I think we're into a workshop or blacksmith building in this area.
OK. Yeah, well, don't make it too huge. Bear in mind, you know, we haven't got much left of the day and it's still raining.
Over in the domestic area of the settlement, Phil's now confident that there were 2 huts on this platform with just a narrow gap between them.
Hut's down the side.
What, down here somewhere?
Yeah.
But working out the internal layout, how the different rooms fitted around this central chimney, is proving surprisingly complicated and time-consuming.
This area is crucial. I want to make a good job of this. I mean, I'm very much aware this is the first building of its type that's ever been dug, and I don't want to sell it short. But what I'd like to do is get some of this rubble around the hearth and see if there's anything underneath it. But the other thing I want to do is actually get into some of the foundations, because we really don't know what sort of foundations they built this thing on. So I think those are the crucial answers.
While Phil continues to investigate the archaeology of his hut, Helen's been trying to work out who once lived in it by going through the 1871 census. We've now enlisted the help of the local history society from Sedbergh, who've been researching these records for years, and they've got a few suggestions of their own.
Of the people connected with the railway, about 60% were men, 15% were women, and extraordinarily 25% of them were children.
We have one hut here, James and Joanna Baxtondale. They're there with their children, John, age 6, George, 3, and Joshua, just 8 months.
Actually, weirdly, those are the same ages as my children. I know how hard it would be. Golly.
Yesterday evening, Naomi emailed her fiancé, who is just as sad as the rest of us and actually has thousands of pictures of clay pipes at home. God, your evenings must be dynamite.
Oh, yes.
He came back with some information.
He did, so we have a little bit of the mystery solved. Remember, we had this yesterday with the nice red rose. Apparently, it's known as a cabbage rose, and this dates to the late 1800s, so that's quite nice.
Yeah. Now, this one you had problems with because you'd only got a tiny sliver of it.
Yeah, which is a shame, but we did manage to deduce that it could be part of an Irish harp.
You say could be, but actually looking at it, that little curve in there like that, that's got to be a harp, and you can even see the strings down there.
Yeah. So, but the interesting thing about this is that they were made in Manchester, typically by Irishmen.
For homesick Irishmen stuck in the Yorkshire Dales.
Yeah.
But this one's the real beauty, isn't it?
This is saving the best till last, the creme de la creme of pipes.
Now, I didn't realise what this was originally. In fact, to be honest, I thought it was just a bit of mud with another bit of mud on the back. But looking at it now, it's cleaned up. It's a beetle, isn't it? And it's got this beautiful iridescence on the back of the beetles. Any idea what kind?
We thought they might have been a tobacco beetle. That's the closest we could get to it. But the best thing about this is the top. We thought this was tobacco staining in the pipe.
This sort of black stuff?
Yeah. But actually, these kind of pipes had a little metal lid on the top, so that's actually metallic corrosion.
So the bloke who lost this was probably pretty gutted, wasn't he?
I think I would have been, yeah.
Matt, what about your pipe? Is that lit?
I think it's more full of rainwater now.
His spirit is indomitable, isn't it?
He's not doing too bad at all.
Our own pipe-chewing navvy is coming to the end of his 24 hours hard labour, and he seems surprisingly chipper for someone who's been shifting rocks for hours on end. But that could have something to do with the diet.
The beer, I think, was an essential way of helping to numb the pain.
Matt, is your pain being numbed?
It is much number than it was.
But little does he know that his reward may be less than he thinks. Because although the railway company relied on men and women like Matt to build their tracks, cuttings and tunnels, they also saw the navvy as a source of profit.
Navvies got all of their food from shops that were actually supplied by the contractors themselves. It was called the truck system, and the navvies usually were paid partly in tokens as well as money, and they had to spend those tokens at the contractor's shop. So this was a system that was really open to exploitation. The contractors could basically try and make as much money as they could from things such as watering down the beer, mixing in sawdust with the flour to make bread, and selling meat that was actually rotten. And one social commentator at the time said that the building companies often made more money from the bowels of the navvies than they did from the construction project itself.
And there was nothing the navvies could do.
There weren't really. They were stuck here on top of places like this, in a rise hill, with just that shop to buy from.
Hi, Mike. This trench is nearly finished, isn't it?
Well, I think we've got something rather exciting, actually.
Back up at our new trenches beside the railway line, we've finally worked out what caused John's complex geophys results.
These heat-affected stones are sitting in a mortared level. You know, that's this orangey stuff down here.
So that's about, what, that thick, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a couple of inches thick. And that's sitting on a clay layer, that's sitting on the peat.
Whew, 3 layers?
Yep, 3 layers. So in other words, it's really quite a heavily engineered building. I think we're looking at something like smithing, forging going on in this area.
What sort of objects?
This is for repairing stuff on site, you know, stuff to do with the beam engine and to do with the carriages as well.
So that would explain why it's just next door to the tramway, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
OK. Well, look...
So we think the geophys results here show a collection of workshops. And with this industrial area now established around shaft number 2, we can put all our efforts into the domestic side of the camp.
You got it? I'll give you the medal then.
But as the rest of the team redouble their efforts, one digger can hang up their cloth cap. Ding, 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 ding. It's lunchtime, Matt. Your trials and tribulations are over.
Well done. You stay so cheerful.
Well, yeah, there's a reason for that.
How are you feeling?
Not bad, actually, not bad. I think 24 hours is OK. Doing it for 5 years, though, I think might be a different kettle of fish.
Have we any idea how much Rocky shifted?
Yeah, we've added it up to 4.6 tonnes. Now, I know what you're thinking, that's nowhere near 20 tonnes.
No.
But I think this experiment has been extremely worthwhile because if you think about it, Matt's been both picking up the stone, putting them in, wheeling it over and taking it out. And I think on a really big construction job like this, you'd have had separation of employment. When we're in a real hurry, we tend to have somebody shoveling and somebody barrowing, and it speeds everybody up. So one man could probably, a strong man used to it with assistance, have done 20 tonnes.
The big question, though, is how much has he earned?
Well, we're going to pay you 3 shillings and 6pence, which is what the navvies here got paid.
Well done.
But we obviously have to make some deductions. Now, you've had 10 pints of beer, 3pence a pint, that's 30p, which is 2 shillings and 6pence. So immediately you have to give me back 2/3 of your pay, which you've stupidly spent on beer.
He's going to end up owing the boss money.
For a 10-hour day?
Oh, yes.
But at least you've made him happy.
Yeah, very happy.
And you can go and have your lunch. Or a little sleep.
I think a snooze is what I need right now.
Well done.
Hi, Raksha, did we put the trench in the right place?
We did. If you have a look at this, can you see this bit of wood running all the way down here? That's actually a woodline drain for the latrine. So somebody would have sat up there and then all of the waste would have run down this hill, pretty much like how, you know, we've dug our drainage ditch and the water's running through.
Right. Well, tell me about the building, Stuart.
There'd be a series of wooden stalls along here, like long planks with literally holes in that you sit on. And dare I say it, this is sort of literally at the business end of the latrines. It's far enough away and down slope so the smells don't go up there.
It hasn't been so brilliant to actually trowel this trench and see the colour change, but you need to have a good sniff at that.
It's 130 years old. It's not a good vintage, is it?
No.
So we've now established the toilet block is at the limits of our settlement. But this little trench has another story to tell. One that epitomises just how harsh life could be for the people stationed on this remote hillside.
Here, there's a story about a shocking suicide. One of the men who lodged in one of the huts was named Robert Nicholson, a filler of wagons in the tunnel. Now, the story goes that for some 4 or 5 weeks he'd been unwell. And as his spirits were low, he'd been heard to say that he would cut his throat with his knife. And now, a person had been appointed to look after him, which I think is a really interesting thing to do in the 19th century. He's on suicide watch.
So he's got some sort of like valley fever or something like that. You know, he's exposed in all of these elements and he's just depressing him.
Something like that, yeah. He went to the water closet, which was at a short distance from the huts. He remained longer than was considered necessary, and his minder went to look after him. When they found that his threat had been literally carried out, he had with his knife cut his throat. He was gasping in the agony of death. I mean, that's awful, isn't it, to cut your own throat, be that desperate.
This site may be haunted by death and suicide, but the finds from across Phil's Trench show the resilience of the people who lived here and their determination to make day-to-day life as normal as possible. It's very odd, isn't it? We'd expected to find really rudimentary stuff, one chip plate maybe, one knife, and this is much more elegant.
Yes, it's quite posh, a lot of this stuff, and I wouldn't have thought it's for the everyday navvy, but you know.
I know what your best one is.
Yeah, definitely. Our little dog statue would have sat on the fireplace. Beautiful little piece. It would have a matching one as well.
Remarkably, we're now pretty confident that these finds came from the hut that was lived in by the Baxendale family, their 3 young children and 14 lodgers in 1871. And thanks to the meticulous work carried out by Phil, we now think we know the layout of that hut and how it was focused around the central hearth and chimney.
Now, when they build that hearth, we can say that they're bringing in stone from somewhere else, because one of the stones that we found there has got a drill hole. So that is coming from another part of the contract further on down the line. And we can actually see how big that hearth was.
Yeah, it's big, isn't it?
We've got a massive material around this fireplace. Where Faye is, there are no finds in the area of the building, suggesting that that is definitely the sleeping quarters.
Helen, you're lurking in the background. How does what Phil's saying tie in with the kind of research that you've been doing?
Well, it's very similar, but I think I put the stress on the domestic. It was quite home-like here, because each one of these huts was rented out to a married couple, and 2 of the couples had small children. So they're the householders. They're probably living in this end with one fireplace. And then in the middle, they've got these lodgers, between 5 and 14 lodgers, and they're cooking and living communally here. So the lady of the house is doing the cooking for the lodgers, who are probably sleeping, as you say, in the far room. But the lady of the house did more than just cook. She really did seem to try to make it nice here. They were making curtains, they were cutting pictures out of magazines and pasting on the walls. It really was quite nice.
Maybe not such a bad life after all.
It's exactly the story that we're getting from the archaeology.
This house stood here for just 5 years in the 1870s, part of a small settlement we've rediscovered over the last 3 days. And it's amazing to think that this community, people like this, doing an awful lot of this, built this. A monument to human industry that's still going strong over 130 years later. But they also left one other landmark in the landscape, one that's even closer to the hearts of our archaeologists. This is quite bizarre. We're standing here in the pouring rain. Phil is looking up at this slag heap and he's going, oh, that's a thing of beauty. That's what he said, a thing of beauty.
It is a lovely, lovely piece of engineering. I love spoil tips, I really, really do. And I'll tell you what, I admire, I worship the people who can make a good spoil tip.
How do they make it, Francis? To me, it looks just like people have gone and chucked their spoil away.
Well, that's because you haven't lived with spoil heaps for 30 years like I have. Look at the flat top there, Tony. That didn't happen by accident. There was a railway line up there, and they had wagons that side-tipped these enormous rocks down the slope. I mean, it's a fantastic achievement.
It's engineering, Tony.
Yeah. That's all I need to know about spoil heaps. Join Time Team on Patreon to access exclusive 3D models, masterclasses and behind-the-scenes insights.